Where's my Facebook? Awkward time here where we are live and not cool.
This is the best time. I will talk to you afterwards. What I did, because I figured out I didn't want to have these awkward moments. I actually set up. Well, you were on my show where I had my countdown with the music and everything.
We should hopefully have that soon.
Cool.
Zach Taylor, Zach, he's helping me out. Actually, he just had another engagement tonight.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I'm not sure because you use StreamYard. I'm not sure what all is available there, but I do know there are people that use like intros and stuff like that. So I do know there's some availability of some kind that you can do.
But I do know there are people that. Nope. Okay. We'll get going here in just a second, everybody.
No problem. I have shared it on all of my various sharing areas. So.
Okay. Well, I think I've stalled long enough. Well, happy Monday to you, Spike, and I'm
happy Monday.
I'm stoked to get to chat with you here twice in a week, essentially.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thanks for coming on, and welcome everybody that's tuning in on the live streams right now. Bear with me. This is our now 4th edition of Be Free TV. I am not a professional podcaster. I have no Patreon set up, but you can certainly still donate to my campaign at anthonywealthy.com. But you guessed it here on the Be Free TV show. We're going to be talking about freedom and freedom-based solutions to government-manufactured issues and how those solutions can make the lives of everyday people better. So I'm excited to have you all joining us in this format. As you know, in the last week or so, we've been really diving into specific topics around healthcare, insurance, government reform, and diving into some more finer details on that, which I feel like is often glossed over when a lot of the other politicians are out talking about, how they want to fix things. So I'm excited today to have Spike Cohan on the broadcast with us, join us as the Libertarian candidate for Vice President of the country. So
the
Spike,
United States.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you folks for having me, or thank you Anthony for having me, and thank you folks for tuning in. If you're on the East Coast, thanks for tuning in at 10 p.m. Eastern. So hopefully you are ready for an edition of Spike Cohan late night.
Oh, late night. I like that. I don't think we have an after hours podcast scheduled, but maybe next edition.
We'll work on it.
Remind me, what part of the country are you actually in? I don't recall.
I live in the Myrtle Beach, South Carolina area.
That's right. South Carolina. You and I did talk about that. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, North Carolina, South Carolina.
Mm-hmm. Yep, the Carolinas.
Cool. Yeah, so East Coast in the house. West Coast is the best coast. Even if our governors here on the West Coast are all collaborating with each other, and kind of working against the Republic. But Spike, appreciate you joining us. As I mentioned, Spike is running for the vice president nomination of the Libertarian Party with Vermin Supreme. And what I was interested in chatting with you here, Spike, specifically, is kind of what you think, initially here, what the role of POTUS is, what the executive role of POTUS and vice president is in the White House when it comes to things like insurance, right? Right now, we have states that are trying to pass lots of regulations on things. We've got, Obamacare, we've got Medicare for all, we've got all these different solutions, so to speak. But I'm curious from a pure, executive role, what you truly think the role of president is, right? Should presidents be going around talking about, what they're going to go pass all the time and maybe what a libertarian's perspective might be?
Honestly, I think the biggest thing is that, and obviously I'm running for vice president, so my role would be more of the bully pulpit / if something happened to the president, I would fill in. And then also if there were a tie in the Senate as the president of the Senate, I would go in and break that tie. But in terms of what a presidential administration would do as a libertarian, let's be clear. The problem we're in is a combination of very bad legislation and very bad executive orders. And that's not limited to healthcare. I mean, pretty much any issue: immigration, defense, war, spending, infrastructure, education, any subject you can think of. Government has either created a problem or made it worse, and that is in all three of the branches, including the executive one. So I would think that a libertarian administration's greatest role would be in rolling back two things. One is rolling back as many of the existing orders and regulations as they can, because I'll say thankfully for a libertarian president, the Congress, the legislature has so, basically handed their role to the president in so many ways that they've created these commissions and these agencies through law that have so much authority that they're effectively creating legislation at the executive level. The beauty of that for a libertarian administration is that we could roll a lot of that back and end a lot of that and refigure a lot of that without even having to go to Congress. The second thing would be to go to Congress and say a lot of this stuff has to go. The regulations that are in place are what are creating the problems with the supply in the market, in the healthcare market, and also cost and the ability to access healthcare for so many people. And health insurance. And so that would probably be the biggest thing. And obviously also using the bully pulpit that comes with being president and vice president to explain to the American people how government created this problem or made it worse, and what we should be doing to roll back and give the power back to the people so that they can make the choices and be able to have more accessible and more affordable care.
I think you make some good points there, and it begs the question for clarification. Would you say that, over the last 10, 20 years, that the federal government is placing too many restrictions on how insurance is bought and sold? Like, just in a general sense, that there is too much, that they're trying to do too many things that are being harmful to the everyday person.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you look, and this is with anything, but with healthcare, their role has been to tax, regulate, and subsidize the market, and that has led to what one would expect when that happens: lack of access to care, exceedingly high costs that just continue to skyrocket, and the rate at which it continues to skyrocket. So you have this sort of compounding growth of the cost of healthcare, which is true in education and many other things. The more involved government is in a sector of the economy or a sector of our lives, really, the worse off we are for it. The less access we have, the more difficult it is to get access, and the more expensive it is. So yeah, I mean, specifically the health insurance. Why can't you purchase health insurance in another state or another country for that matter? What effective reason is there for you to be limited in your choices to? I mean, if you live in a state like Rhode Island or Connecticut, you have a tiny, tiny little area that you're able to actually purchase health insurance in. But even if you're in a California or a Texas or a Washington State or New York or whatever, why should you be limited to an arbitrary geographical area that has absolutely nothing to do with the market of health insurance itself? Health insurance is something you should be able to get from anywhere. And if you open up the market that way, you would have much more competition. You wouldn't have these sort of statewide cartels. I know in our state, if you're not with either Blue Cross or Humana, you're probably not insured with anyone. There may be other insurers, but those are the big ones. And when those are the few people in there, and they have such a small market that they're able to corner the market on, you effectively have a monopoly. And I mean, that's just the beginning of the problems. But yeah, no, there's no reason for government to be telling you where you can be purchasing insurance from. And when you consider how important healthcare and health insurance from is, there's no reason for them to be taxing it for that matter. Why should they be taxing people trying to stay well and get better?
Yeah, that seems backward in thought there. The more money you have, the better you can care for yourself.
Exactly.
But the taxes there have absolutely got to go. And actually, you mentioned something that I've actually kind of forgotten in some of my recent conversations, but I was reminded of it today. So I'm glad you mentioned the subsidies that the insurance companies get, because just today it came out through the Supreme Court in an 8-1 vote that the taxpayers are legally responsible for, I think it was 12 billion or maybe 16 billion, somewhere in that 12 to 16 billion range, subsidizing insurance carriers that were offering insurance at lower prices than they would otherwise maybe have offered it.
And that was today?
That came out, I think it was today. I saw the news article today.
Wow.
So that's again 12 to 16 billion dollars that we, the taxpayers, are going to have to pay to these corporations that help write the law. Let's not forget that the lobbyists helped write these rules.
Yeah,
Right.
very rarely does a legislator write a law unless it's some kind of pet thing of theirs, and usually it's more of a feel-good thing. Anytime you have these huge omnibus laws that cover so many different things, and usually they throw healthcare and education and the big things all together. That's being written by lobbyists. That's being written by cronies, people who are in the private sector. We'll call it the private sector, even though they're basically functionaries of the state, and they go in to government, to their crony, to their preferred politicians in both parties, and say, this is what we want. This is what's going to be the most profitable for us. And that's not a free market. That's not people becoming wealthy by providing value to their fellow man and their fellow woman. That is the market. That is people becoming rich by using the government to create barriers to entry for their competitors and funneling money that they steal from you, the taxpayer, and give to them directly in the form of subsidies and bailouts. I mean, we see that all the time. Look at these so-called stimulus plans. We're seeing how small businesses and individuals are scrounging to get a little bit of money while they're being told they have to stay home. And yet the jet-setting billionaires, we talk about universal basic income. The billionaires got universal basic income, universal basic billionaire income they got. Everyone else got pennies. And it's the same thing with healthcare. So no, the less involved the government is, the better, because now instead of having cronies and corrupt legislators and corrupt executives, meaning like the president and vice president and the executive branch deciding these things, or even a corrupt Supreme Court deciding that you have to pay it, instead you have you and the providers who have to compete directly to give you a better service. And that's always a better outcome than from a monopoly like the government.
Yeah, it seems like a double dip here, and I know it truly isn't, but it feels like it because the news just broke today about that topic. But one of the reasons why I'm running for insurance commissioner here in Washington State was because of that fine that essentially is now being reallocated back because of the Supreme Court. So I know it's all, it's not truly a double dip, but it feels like it because I paid for it years ago, and now it's been held up and they've been arguing it in court. And I get the news today that, oh, yep, those insurance companies are going to get my money. And so many people have been harmed by these policies. And one of the things that the two-party system never does, whether it's right or left, and no matter what the topic is, anytime a rule or a law is passed, downhill somewhere, somebody isn't happy. It's hurting their life in one fashion or another.
Yep.
Sure, it might help a couple people, right? And we want to help people in voluntary ways and such. But the side effect of these regulations, like Obamacare and making sure poor people got insurance for cheap, is that the middle class that was maybe just barely making it was getting taxed for not buying something that they didn't want. And then again, that money going back to the insurance companies.
Right, exactly.
It's terrible. So do you think in a perfect world, when we get Vermin Supreme and Spike Cohan into that beautiful White House, do you think the role of libertarian is to veto those bills?
It's to veto those bills and to completely change the conversation. Now let's talk about what it would take for for libertarians to win an election. It would take a sea change in public opinion. I mean, right now, the highest we've ever gotten for a presidential race has been 3.25%. In order to win enough of the vote to be able to get enough of an advantage in the electoral college for a Republican and Democrat Congress to actually sign off on that victory, we'd probably need to get about 35 to 40% of the vote. So what that would mean is that that we had been effective in creating a sea change of difference with public opinion, in understanding that the Republicans created this problem and that the libertarians are here to fix it and roll back the problems that they've created and made worse. in that reality that we become president and vice president, we have a very powerful bully pulpit and an engaged and essentially outraged people who are ready to see a major change. And so, we see that with the Republicrats. This is what they do. They create bad legislation. You've mentioned Obamacare. Even before that, Medicare Part D with George Bush. 'Cause, a lot of times we get caught up in what the Democrats did or what the Republicans did. If you strip away the facade of there being a major difference between the two parties, you just see a straight line of government constantly growing and it not mattering who's in charge. It just keeps getting worse. Government becomes bigger, it becomes more powerful. The US Code of Laws gets bigger and more undecipherable. The cost and scope and power of government continues to progressively grow no matter who's in charge. That includes now with Trump and a Democrat House and a Republican Senate. So it doesn't matter. So we would be vetoing things, but we would also be using the bully pulpit to affect change and show the people what needs to be changed. And we'd be using that pressure, that public pressure, not just to veto things, but to basically force Congress to rethink how they're legislating and letting them know that we're going to be fighting them every step of the way. I'd like to talk briefly about the history of why healthcare is so expensive to begin with.
Please.
If you look at prior to the World War II era, healthcare roughly grew with the cost of living. So if the cost of living went up 4 or 5%, the cost of healthcare went up 4 or 5%. During depressions, when the cost of living would go way down because there was less money, the cost of healthcare would also go way down because it was largely market driven. It wasn't a perfect system, but it was largely market driven. You didn't have people, with the exception of a handful of veterans who were harmed from World War I and I believe the Spanish American War. No one else was getting government, and I guess government employees. No one else was getting healthcare from government. They were paying for their own healthcare. And so as a result, and we were still seeing advances in medicine all the way up until that point. What happened during World War II was that there was a threat that FDR, in order to stop war profiteering, he was going to set maximum salaries for various positions. Because at that point, the majority of Americans were working towards the war effort. Whatever they were doing, whatever factory they were working in, or whatever role they had was more than likely contributing to the war effort, which means it was being paid for by the U.S. government. So FDR had a plan, which he never actually enacted, but he threatened to do it to try to suppress wages. He threatened to put a maximum wage on pretty much every type of job. These employers, in order to meet the demand of the U.S. government to get around that, because they realized that it was likely that they were only going to be able to pay X amount to their employees in order to still get the best employees, they found ways around it. One of those ways around it was a pension. That's when pensions started, which is largely a good thing. But one of the bad things that started was they came up with health insurance. Up until then, health insurance was something that you paid a minimal amount for that covered you in the case of something catastrophic. If something terrible happened to you, then they would step in and pay for it after a certain deductible was met. Sort of like house insurance, car insurance, that kind of stuff. Your car insurance doesn't pay for you to get gas. Your car insurance doesn't pay for you to, change your tires or get a plug fixed or whatever. It pays for catastrophic damage. It pays for, severe damage or liability on someone else's damage. So that's basically what health insurance was. These employers started offering to give health insurance that was more of a wraparound coverage. It would cover more standard stuff, day-to-day care. And so what happened was now, as more and more people had health insurance, now you saw a small separation, which was created by government, because that was not something that there was a market for until government artificially entered the market and created this suppression of wages. And to get around it, they offered this health insurance. And so what happened there is that now instead of the person who was the patient also being the person who was making the payment decision, it was now an insurance person that was doing this. It was now based on an actuarial. It was now a claims adjuster and all of that would step in and decide what these different services were worth. And whenever you add separation between the consumer of a product and the purchaser of a product, you start to see cost outstrip increases in actual value. And so you started to see this slight creeping up where insurance from the period of the late 1930s, or I guess early to mid 1940s until coming into the mid to late 1960s, where health insurance, the cost of healthcare because of insurance started to outstrip the increase, the just general increase in the cost of living. And that culminated in the 1960s of the government saying, well, a lot of poor people and a lot of elderly people can't afford insurance, can't afford healthcare anymore. And so we're going to give them healthcare through Medicaid and Medicare. And that was fought tooth and nail, but then it was enacted. And now you had even more of a separation, because now you had people who were getting care and not paying for it, or only paying 20% in the case of Medicare. And so now you saw an even greater increase, or a greater gap between the increase in the cost of living and the increase in the cost of healthcare. And that brings us into the 1970s and 1980s with one adjustment and expansion of Medicaid and Medicare to the next, going into the 90s and early 2000s with Medicare Part D. Cost of healthcare continuing to go much higher than the cost of living, again, because there were more and more separations being added between the consumer of healthcare and the payer of healthcare, while simultaneously they were adding restrictions on who you could go to get care and to get insurance. So they were restricting the market, they were subsidizing the market, they were creating an artificial market that wasn't needed, and they were providing a separation between the consumer and the payer, which in this case was the government. And
This
that brings
sounds like a Sims game, like a video game or something, not like real life. Like, how did government do this over 70 years? Because you're absolutely right, and it's so obvious. You can see that trajectory.
I mean, there's charts. It just shows it. Like, it was like this, and then it went like this, and then it went like this, and then it went like this. And with Obamacare, it is happening even faster now. And with I'm actually relieved that Donald Trump and the Republicans attempt to replace Obamacare with what I guess they were rebranding it as Trump Care and tying the subsidies to age instead of income, which would have made it right through the roof, even faster than it currently is. So, I guess we've dodged a bullet there. It's sad that Obamacare was actually the better alternative there, but here we are. But this is government. This is what happens. And they did the same thing with higher education. They did the same thing with student loans. They've done the same thing to some extent with housing and with automobiles. The more involved they are in the market, the fewer options you have, and the more expensive it gets, to your detriment and to the benefit of cronies who have favored places with their politicians.
Wow, you make insurance sexy, my friend. It's like your dad bod calendar.
Is that sexy? Yeah. Well,
I've got a little red hair in me, so I
okay. Well, hey, listen, everyone's got their kink. I'm not going to kink shame anyone. I'll tell you that.
So for those of you who don't know, Spike posed for our Libertarian Dad Bod calendar, which I think all the funds went to just a local affiliate to help some activism.
That's correct. I can actually pull up my picture if you give me a second. Hold on. I've got that somewhere. Oh, man. Do I have that?
Oh God.
I do somewhere. Hold on. I'll find it. Ask me then. I don't want to have you wait. Ask me the next question and I'll
I'll have to do a special screening of it just later, just for you, and we'll hover directly over your picture, zoom in a few times. No, but I appreciate the history behind that, because I think some of the disconnect that we have in conversation nowadays is knowledge, right? It's fully understanding, what's happened and why. And that's not to blame other people necessarily, right? Healthcare and regulation and insurance is extremely complex. It's a giant web. It's a giant
it is very much
nest of, I like to equate it to like a fishing reel that's all knotted up, right? And you don't know where to start and get the knots out. So when we're talking with, average people that maybe aren't as interested in having these conversations, right? Let's be honest, talking about healthcare is not always everybody's favorite topic, right? It's very easy. Oh man, the only thing easier than talking healthcare is looking at this photo. Look at that. That could be your future vice president, my friends.
This is what you're gonna get if you vote for me for vice president. And a lot of it, and anyone who knows me personally knows this is my natural habitat, mostly naked in the water. But anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So naked under the waves there.
No. I'm wearing a little something there. Yeah.
Oh man. Well, I appreciate your insight there. I wanted to touch on some other basic kind of government reforms that a lot of non-libertarians don't know about, and it was one of the first things that made me libertarian. Actually,
Okay.
was hearing other voices on the debate stage.
Yeah.
In 2012, I decided to step away from the Democrat Party. I voted for Obama in 2008, so I apologize for that error in judgment. I made a mistake. Please forgive me. Um, but by 2012, I um, decided I wanted to vote libertarian. I voted Gary Johnson and looked away. I didn't know about debates or ballot access or any of that kind of stuff. But by 2016, I got involved, and I was really excited to support somebody for the first time. It's like, you know what, I believe in this. I want to support, Mr. Gary Johnson.
Mhm.
I climb a mountain. Let's get behind him, right? But I quickly realized how corrupt just the political system is. And it really kind of solidified my walk away moment from the Democrat Party and the Republican Party, in the sense that these two parties are most obviously colluding with each other to keep dissenting ideas and differing opinions on
Mhm.
the ballots and out of the debates. So for those that are maybe newer to this conversation, why don't you touch just briefly on what the Presidential Debates Commission is, why libertarians hate it so much, and and then I have a follow-up question to that too, but go ahead.
Sure, absolutely. So, and this, by the way, is why I call them the Republic Rats. Some people call them the duopoly, which it sort of describes what they are, but it also still kind of makes it sound like there's still two components. In my mind, you do have two competing components that they want to have these individuals in charge, mostly in charge over these individuals, and these individuals want to be a little more in charge than these individuals. But if you look at the differences between the party, they're both pushing the same thing: endless war, endless debt, endless taxation, endless growth of government, endless putting people in cages for victimless crimes of commerce that they don't like, endless subjugation, endless, every terrible thing you can think of, endless driving up the cost of things to your detriment and to the benefit of their cronies. It doesn't matter which party you vote for. So that's why I call them the Republic Rats, because at the end of the day, they're one giant monster that is imposing themselves on all of us across the board. The Presidential Commission of Debates is where basically the Republic Rats took it was, I believe, the League of Women Voters, who originally controlled the debates, and they had minimal criteria for entry. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe what happened was when after Ross Perot was able to meet whatever polling criteria as a third party candidate to make it to the debate stage, the Republicans realized that they would never allow that to happen again. Now, keep in mind, the Democrats benefited from Ross Perot entering the race because he took a lot of votes from George Bush. And yet the Democrats were every bit as enthusiastic about making sure that someone like a Ross Perot would never get on, which tells you that to them, it's not about stopping Republicans. It's about stopping anyone but Republicans and Democrats. And so what they've done is, I believe that the newest restriction is that in order to make it to the presidential debate, you have to score 15% in an opinion poll, 15% or higher in, I believe, two or three opinion polls, but they decide which ones are the valid ones. And so when Gary Johnson was close in 2016 a couple times, close enough to be within shooting distance of making it to the debate stage, they did everything they could to try to disqualify those polls and say, no, those aren't count. These were like Monmouth and CNN, and like these were legit polls, and he was coming close enough, and there was no reason to keep him off the debate stage. And if I believe that one of the reasons I support Vermin is I believe, especially with a public that is absolutely disgusted at the fact that the Republicans have the sheer audacity to tell them that they have to choose between one, potential rapist, who, warmongering sociopath, and another potentially rapist, warmongering sociopath, both of whom can barely form a coherent sentence. That those are your two options. I think, especially in that atmosphere, in that air of disgust among the general public, Vermin could easily we could easily score 15% or more. I would not then be surprised if they decided suddenly to make it higher. 20% needs to be 20% for the integrity of the commission. The presidential commission of debates is basically set up to make sure that you never see anyone but the two people that they decide you should be able to see for president out of our nation of 350 million or 330 some odd million people, that you can only see these two people as your viable option for president.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely terrible. And, you know, as much as I can debate policy with anybody,
right?
And it's okay that we disagree on policy. It's natural. I think something that every American should, well, let me rephrase that. That sounds really corny. I wish that this topic was something that every American could get behind, because it doesn't have anything to do with Republican or Democrat or Libertarian or Green. It has to do with like having a voice and being able to run for office, right?
Exactly.
And I know it's the highest office in the world, and even libertarians have 30 different people running for office. You can't put everybody on that final stage. I get it, but
I understand that. Yeah,
the debate commission was originally the League of Women's Voter, which is a good nonprofit. And with good history, mostly good history. They've got a few things here or there that one might disagree with. But what happened was in 1984, the Presidential Debates Commission became a separate private organization, not a public kind of nonprofit. And it's controlled by a board of Democrats and Republicans that collude with one another to, that originally started out with a couple-page contract, finally turned into an 8-page contract. And by all reports I've heard since the 1980s, those contracts are now closer to 30 pages.
Oh, I'm sure.
Things like, let's say even a libertarian doesn't get on the debate stage. It would prohibit somebody like Trump or Bernie or Biden or whoever the person was from saying, okay, well, I'll do the main debate, but I'm also willing to debate this guy over here for the good of the country.
Yep.
You can't, because it would be breaking their contract, and then they would be held liable. And that's protecting the investors. It's protecting the commercial money. It's protecting the media stations that are broadcasting these things.
Yep.
And the failure of that is that we, the people, lose out on good ideas from being heard. So I'm glad that you're aware of that issue. I know most libertarians are, but it's something I'm going to constantly harp on as much as I can. Go back and forth with Biden or Trump on policy. For me, it's about getting back to the basics, right? We can't even get on the stage to have that conversation, and that's just not right.
Even being allowed to just say what you have to say. I agree with you, because there are some people that say, if you want to run for president, you should be on that debate stage. Well, I mean, you'd end up with like 50,000 people on the debate stage. I get that there needs to be that any organization, in order to have some level of manageability, has to have some kind of cutoff. There's no reason that cutoff can't be 1% or 3% or 2%. I mean, you could easily reduce it down to 4 or 5 candidates by doing that. And there's no reason you can't have 4 or 5 running for president of the United States of America.
How dare we have 4?
How dare you have 4? I mean, people, when they hear that, they go, 4 people. It's like, it's for the highest office in the land. Why on earth would you not allow there to be 10? I mean, people freak out when they hear that, but it's like 330 million, 340, however many, well over 300 million people. We can't have 4 viable options of people that are saying what they have to say, and that's just the beginning of it.
Even with the lack of toilet paper right now, we still got 4 choices of toilet paper to wipe our what's with.
Exactly.
More than 2 when it comes to a president. So
yeah.
And one of the things here too that you mentioned was the polling. So I can go into a little bit more in depth on that for folks. Is the polls that are used, what Spike was alluding to, is there's all types of polls, right? All the media stations are doing polls. All the candidates are buying polls. Lots of polls out there. Well, the Presidential Debates Commission pre-selects what polls they're going to use.
Yep.
Okay, that sounds fair, right? You've got to have, okay, this is who we're using. We're not going to use anybody else, right? Okay, I get that. In 2016, one of the polls they used was from Gallup.com. The president of the debate commission was the editor-in-chief of Gallup.com. So he selected his own company's poll for one of the 4 polls that excluded, Jill Stein and Gary Johnson. So, there's nothing but cheating, lying, and stealing going on here at every level. And the other political parties, and I challenge my friends that are running Democrat or Republican that might be listening into this. I challenge you to earn my respect and my vote as a colleague in office potentially, and as somebody that you might want an endorsement for. Right. I call on you to call out this bad behavior. Right? It's okay if we have other differences on things, but if we can't get down to the basics of letting people on the debate stage, right? We have more. We might have less in common than you even think. We need these Democrats and Republicans that are running for state house or Congress or stuff to also own up and hold their own political parties accountable. And that's one thing that I like telling people that's about the Libertarian Party. And for as much as us libertarians know that our infighting and our bickering can be tiresome, at least we call each other out on our behalf, and we hold each other accountable. And sometimes that's to a fault, honestly. But the other party just buries their head in the sands and said, "Nope, company line. This is what we're doing. We're voting for these people no matter what.
Of course,
and we're supporting them no matter what."
And let's be clear as to why they're keeping. It's not just about Gary Johnson or Ross Perot or Jill Stein or Vermin Supreme or Spike Cohen or Anthony Welty or whatever. It's about framing the narrative that you have two options, the Republican and Democrat options, and that this is the entirety of the American political spectrum is Republican and Democrat. And that's it. Anything else is just insanity. It's so insane that we can't even let you see it. And if they allowed even 4 people, or let's say something crazy, 6 people on the debate stage at the same time that are running for the highest office in the land, or for Washington State insurance commissioner, or for governor, or for Congress, or whatever else, if they allowed that, then people would see, oh, wait, Republicans and Democrats sound a hell of a lot alike compared to these other people, and their ideas sound pretty damn good in comparison. Yeah. And that's the problem. That's why they don't want it. And that's why they're not going to let you have that option. And it's worse than that. They don't even want you on the ballot. I mean, you see New York State, I don't know how Washington is, but many states, they keep increasing the number of signatures you have to get on the ballot. Again, I understand the need to not have a 70-page long ballot just filled with every person who said, yeah, I'm going to run for governor. I'm going to run for, I get it. But even saying 500 signatures would wipe out all but a handful of those people. It would show a certain level of a minimum level of planning and ability to organize for them to qualify to be on the ballot. And if you're if the reason you're keeping them off is, well, they don't have a shot in hell, good. So then let them on. If they don't have a shot in hell, let them on the debate stage. Let them on the ballot.
Yeah, make us look bad.
You don't think they don't exactly make them look bad, and make our party and our candidates look bad. They know that's not what's going to happen. They're shutting us out. They're refusing to debate us. They're refusing to have us on the ballot. They're doing everything they can to keep us out, not just because they're scared of our ideas, but because they're scared of even letting people know and see firsthand that it's not just Republicans and Democrats. I'm trying to do right and left on your side, but just Republicans and Democrats, respectively, that there are other ideas, and that when you compare the Republicans and Democrats to everyone else, they seem very similar. They seem like they suck, and everyone else sounds a lot better than that.
Yeah. Well, I'll digress from that here in just a second, but I do want to address a comment that I'm seeing here. Chris Reynolds says Spike wants socialized debates. That's an interesting point. And I know what you're probably joking, Chris. It's kind of funny, but that is something interesting to bring up here. The difference between libertarians and other parties.
This is Chris Reynolds. This is Chris Reynolds.
That's the personal injury lawyer, right?
Personal injury attorney Chris Reynolds, attorney at law here.
Can you trust him? He's a lawyer. No.
I do. I trust him because he's a sponsor of ours. Other than that, no. But no, he's a good friend. I do carry my Chris with me wherever I go.
That's great.
But you're a bad Chris. But no, let's talk about that. This isn't about saying socialized or forcing anyone into it. And Chris knows this, but
I know.
No, Chris knows this, but I do want to address it because it's a good subject. This isn't about having government in control of it. I mean, government sort of is in control of it right now. It's in allowing there to be other options. You have corporate government-sponsored crony corporations who are running this and saying, like you said, having this ridiculous ironclad contract saying, if you, even so much as, mention debating someone else, you're in violation and this is a terrible thing. There's no reason for that. In something like this, it can easily be argued that that goes against the public good, especially when the Republicans and Democrats, this is double dealing. Like, this is fraud. This is double dealing because you have Republicans and Democrats who have a vested interest in having the only access to being able to be elected, who are also in control of the Commission on Debates, who are also contractually obligating all of these companies and all of these candidates. That's corruption. That's not just that's not free market. That's not a free market application is allowing people to have different debates. Because again, there's no reason. Look at the libertarians. All these different channels have had different debates. All these different libertarian outlets. There's been like dozens of libertarian presidential debates with all different candidates and all different qualifying criteria, from private organizations to state parties and everything in between, giving you as many options as possible. Sometimes an overwhelming number of options, but you have those options. There's no reason you can't.
They're doing the right thing, not because they have to, but it's the right thing to do.
It's the right thing to do. Yes.
So, I think you and I would both agree that we don't need to force the Presidential Debates Commission to do what we want. I don't necessarily agree with the lawsuit that Gary was participating. Actually, I suppose I don't completely hate it, but I didn't think it was necessary for us. I would rather just show enough people that this is the corruptness that you're voting for, that you just stop voting for them, and that we don't even need them on the debate stage anymore, because you realize how corrupt they've been for 100 years.
And subvert their system. See, the problem is the media has a vested interest in keeping non-Republicrats out of the system, because all the major media outlets are owned by larger corporate conglomerates who are so heavily vested within this Republicrat government. They make billions, tens of billions of dollars, sometimes hundreds of billions of dollars a year directly on their corrupt cronyism with government. Of course, they're going to keep us out. But here's the other thing. They have a profit motive. They need to get attention from viewers for ad revenue. And that is why I backed Vermin. That's why he's my number one pick. We have some amazing candidates, by the way. We have a tremendous number of good presidential candidates. The reason that Vermin is my number one choice is because he has demonstrated the ability to subvert the media's own game and make them pay attention to him, because he has created such a spectacle that they simply have to cover it. And I've done the same thing as well. And I see it every day when I do these satirical interviews, and it gets shared thousands of times. Whereas if I had just gone on there and said, we want to end the wars and lower taxes and. You
mean like this interview right now?
No, because that's why I gave you a little bit of this.
That's worth 1,000 views easily.
Yeah, that's worth 1,000 views at least. But so in doing it in those outlets, this is libertarian media. This is libertarians talking with libertarians and people that are already interested in libertarianism. When I go on like normal media, I have a completely different talk. We talk about cheesy bread and badgers and making police officers sing the Barney theme song. We go crazy with it because it gets attention. And then we have thousands of views, sometimes tens of thousands of views, and then hundreds and sometimes thousands of people contacting us on the website saying, what the hell did I just watch? What are you really about? And then we have an opportunity to talk to them directly one-on-one. We've gotten the media out of the way, and then we're talking to them directly one-on-one about what libertarianism is. We call it boot pilling them. And it has been incredibly effective in bringing people to libertarianism. There is a method to our madness, I assure you. But yes, ultimately, it is about showing the people what this system is and how corrupt it is and how it is shutting us as candidates, but the American people out from hearing all of the options they have, or even more than two of the options.
Yeah, I fully agree. And that's one of the reasons why I'm proud to be a libertarian, and to stop perpetuating that system, and why I even encourage some of my liberal friends to, start looking at the Green Party. I want them to start listening to my solutions as well. But, it's like the two-party system is just not healthy for America, I believe. And I'm glad you're on the same page there.
But, absolutely. Absolutely.
I don't want to bore everybody with a 3-hour conversation about Presidential Debates Commission, because that's how lame libertarians can be sometimes. But
we'll do it.
He will bore you to death.
I will bore you to death with any
debating debates.
Yep, debating debates. Yep.
but it's obvious that you've got a good grasp on, some of the issues that I've been talking about, and so many voters are starting to see when we bring it to the conversation, where the other two, party candidates just aren't even talking about, the history of why these things are broken. So
they couldn't talk about it. They're the ones who created it. Why would they talk about it?
Oh, yeah.
The reason we're here is because we kept screwing up over and over again.
Nobody wants to, talk about their abuse of bad things.
Exactly.
So, well, we'll go another minute or two here, and we'll let you go. But you've given us a couple ideas as far as what you think the president or vice president's role is in healthcare, which is starkly different than left or right. And getting the federal government out of the conversation and letting the markets work. Give us just a couple things real quick, maybe 3 or 4, without going into great detail. Specific things that you think would make healthcare on the front end cheaper, like specific solutions, just bullet point items.
Oh, this is easy. So allow people to get health insurance wherever the hell they want to get it, to whoever the hell will sell it to them. The neighboring state, the state on the other side of the country, Hawaii, Alaska, China, Japan, Canada, whatever. Let them get insurance and encourage other governments to do the same, so that we have a worldwide market. There's no reason. And again, not just health insurance, car insurance, all of it. Let there be more competition and more of a market. That will give you more options. The other thing is to get rid of these subsidization of preferred providers and preferred insurance companies. That is cronyism. That is them stealing money from you and giving it to wealthy people and saying, here, do something good for those poor people we just stole it from. They're not going to. They're going to line their pockets like they always do, and they're going to give some of it back to the politicians in exchange for them continuing to write bad legislation. So rolling back all of that stuff, rolling back anything that would allow, for example, there's a growing movement of membership-based health systems. So instead of you getting health insurance, you pay a flat fee and you get basically unlimited care, or unlimited care up into a point, or unlimited of a certain type of care, basic care, and then with discounts because the insurance isn't involved. Because we could have a whole episode about how much in order to comply with insurance, something like anywhere from, depending on who you ask, anywhere between 30 and 70% of the cost of healthcare is just insurance compliance, Medicaid compliance, and Medicare compliance, jumping through hoops in order to meet compliance and get paid months later on the bill that they on the bill of what they just did for you, instead of just charging you directly. Imagine if healthcare was cut in up to 70% right off the bat, just by getting rid of that bureaucracy. That alone would be a powerful thing, allowing you to get.
I'll pay 7%.
What's that?
Prices going up 10 to 20% every year. I'll take just a 7% reduction.
7%, but I mean, it's been estimated between 30 and 70%. So there's so many things like that could shave down the cost of healthcare simply by removing the artificial impediments to the market that are forcing people to use. No one would be using this system unless it was mandated by law. Just mandated to get insurance, mandated to cover people with insurance, mandated to provide care for people with Medicaid and Medicare and these types of insurance, instead of just allowing patients and doctors to have a relationship together as consumers and producers. Just like with anything else, if government was in charge of a chicken sandwich, it would cost you hundreds of dollars and it would probably have E. coli, and you'd get maybe one a month. But because they're not in charge of chicken sandwiches, you can go anywhere you want. There's ever new, the big Popeye sandwich that was a big thing earlier this year. There's always new chicken sandwiches, and the cost of them pretty much stays the same. They go up or down relative to the cost of living. But you can spend $4 or $5 and get an incredible chicken sandwich. What can you imagine the type of sandwich you would have to get if government decided that chicken sandwich was a right, and that access to chicken sandwiches was a right, and that they were going to provide you with nice free chicken sandwiches by robbing you and putting cronies in charge of it? Same thing with healthcare. So
and then imagine how much cheaper it would be also if they would also stop taxing the property that McDonald's is on with their chicken sandwich, and then taxing the business owner and the workers and the janitors and stuff. And the same thing is true with healthcare and health insurance. It's already expensive. they're driving up the costs, and then wait, they're going to tax the providers as well, which means they all make less, and they have to see more patients, which means our standard of care goes down, and we're less.
Yep. Yep. And they need more and more. So more and more doctors are having to become part of these larger health management companies because they simply can't manage their own practice because they're constantly having to work. So now they become the employee of a health management company whose main thing is profit. And so they're overworking the doctors. I have a lot of friends that are doctors. And nurses. They are completely overworked. They are way overregulated. They have to pay for their own malpractice insurance, which is constantly going through the roof. That's a whole other subject we could spend hours talking about. But it's all because of artificial impositions being placed on the market. These things would not exist this way if the market were free. They only exist because of government arbitrarily deciding who should be winners and losers based entirely on what the cronies who wrote it said it would be. And by the way, I want to give a shout out to you. What I like about you is that I like a lot of things about you. But one of the things I like about you is that in your run, you have been presenting what is essentially a radical libertarian idea, like being able to purchase healthcare wherever the hell you want to, with no government involvement on that, or not having any taxes on healthcare or health insurance. Those are radical, strict libertarian ideas, and you're presenting them as common sense compromises as Republicans and Democrats figure out what the hell they're going to do in the meantime. And I think that that's absolutely beautiful, because instead of saying, because I present things as a radical libertarian, you're presenting things and it's beautiful because it's true. It is a compromise. Hey, in the meantime, while these schmucks figure out what the hell they're going to do, why don't we just not tax you on your healthcare? Why don't we let you get it wherever you want to on your health insurance? It's common sense. It's presented as a compromise, and it is a very, very completely in line. It's not a half measure moderate libertarian stance. It is an across the board, even the most radical of libertarians would agree with it. And you're presenting it as what it is, common sense. And it's absolutely beautiful how you're doing that.
No, thank you. And I appreciate that, and I think it's important that we push the message that direction, because when whenever we do compromise, we want to be compromising from a position of strength, right? In any private business dealing, right? You don't come with your worst case outcome as your first offer to the table, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so radical libertarians abolish all government intervention. We're either free or we're not. But in the meantime, how about we just abolish taxes on your healthcare, because you shouldn't be taxed to be alive.
Which you, as insurance commissioner, that is the scope of your position, right? Like, I'm running for president or vice president, and I'm running with someone for president. So we're trying to we're putting together proposals for everything, basically. You are in a specific thing. It's a very large and important thing, but it's a specific thing. And so you're able to just say, hey, listen, our platform of getting government completely out of the way is my platform on this subject. And I'm presenting it as a common sense compromise thing, which again, it is. It is a legitimate, it makes only common sense to get the government out of the way, because they're the ones who created this problem. They're the ones who continue to make it worse. Let's try not doing that. Let's try letting providers and consumers, patients, figure out what's best between the two of them. That's going to work way better than any kind of, top-down, centrally planned monopoly style solution. So I'm glad you're doing it, and I endorsed you. Actually, I endorsed you on my show, but then I endorsed you publicly a few days ago. So you have 100%. You have my support.
Thank you, and shout out to Cameron Cohan, who just commented here. Cameron, do me a favor, send me any information you have on tort reform. That's a topic I've dived into a little bit, but even from my libertarian perspective, I'm unsure of what the best solution is, or what the path forward is. And frankly, I'm not as educated on that. And it's such kind of an outside the public eye conversation. I've kind of it alone. But Cameron, I'd love to learn from whatever you know on that topic, because it has come up before, and I know malpractice insurance and that stuff is a mess. So, well, Spike, go ahead and kind of one last thing here, as you're talking to some libertarians, some independents and stuff tuning in, but you're also talking to an LPWA delegate right now, and some other delegates that will be seeing this. Go ahead here, take the last minute or two or three, however long you need. go ahead and pitch your candidacy for vice president, and of course your entire ticket. You have the floor, my friend.
Thank you. I appreciate that. First of all, if you are a Libertarian Party delegate, I'd like you to know that I love you very much, and there's nothing I wouldn't do for you. Not to pander or anything like that. So, folks, for those of you who aren't familiar with libertarianism, or you're learning about it, but I can tell you when I first found out about it, it was a little confusing to me because I came out of that Republicrat paradigm that, well, are you conservative or are you liberal, or are you more conservative than the conservatives or more liberal than what exactly are you? Here are the basics of libertarianism. We believe that you own yourself, you own your life, you own your body, you own your labor, and you own the product of your labor, your property. When you do things and you get stuff back for it, that's your property. You own all of these things exclusively, and you have the right to exclusive enjoyment and use and dissemination of it. You can give it to whomever you want. You can lend it to whomever you want, but it's yours. You can sell it to whomever you want, but it's yours to do that. When anyone tries to take that from you, then they are aggressing against you. And that is inherently not just a bad thing from a moral perspective, but it's a bad thing from a utilitarian perspective. It doesn't work. It makes things worse. When someone takes from you and does with it what they wish, they're going to do poorly with it compared to what you would have done, because this is something you actually owned, as opposed to them who just has it because they took it from you, so they'll do whatever they want. So they make inefficient decisions. So in addition to being just inherently morally wrong to take from someone, it's also inefficient. And so we extend that to government. When government takes from you and does what they wish with it, not only is it bad from a moral perspective, but it's inefficient. It's bloated. It's a bad idea. It leads to bad outcomes. It leads to inequitable outcomes. It leads to harmful outcomes. So we as libertarians believe that both from a moral and from a what works perspective, a utilitarian perspective, that self-ownership, non-aggression, not taking from people or harming people or hurting people, and finding voluntary solutions instead of coercive ones are always going to be better than the alternative, which is more control, more taking, more coercion, more violence and threats of violence. Whatever subject we're talking about, we've mostly been talking about healthcare and health insurance in this case. In every case, that's the case. So that's what we believe as libertarians. The reason I'm running for vice president is because I believe in the statement of principles of the Libertarian Party, which starts with saying that we, the Libertarian Party, seek to, I'm going to butcher the quote, but basically that we seek to end the cult of the omnipotent state. And what that means is the idea that government's a good thing and that it does good things, that taxes are good, government spending is good. We know that it's not good. We know that it's both immoral and inefficient. And so we as libertarians reject that cult. And so I, as a vice president, as the vice presidential candidate, am running to present the most honest, radical, and dynamic version of that message to a public that often hasn't heard of such a thing. And so I've been, back when we were allowed to leave our houses, I was traveling to college campuses. I was traveling to housing projects and communities of various income levels, and spreading that inspirationally disruptive message. You own yourself, you own your stuff, and we will stand with you against anyone who tries to take it from you. And it has been incredibly well received. And with your support, Vermin Supreme and I will take that message to the public in a way that no one else can, in a dynamic and engaging way, to spread the message of self-ownership, non-aggression, and freedom and liberty. And if you want to find out more, or you have any questions, or you want to see any more of this kind of stuff here, then I invite you to go to, visit me on my website, which is spike2020.com. That's more of the satirical stuff that I tend to present to the normie audience, to try to get their attention and pique their interest in finding out more. So it's spike2020.com. If you want to find out more about my running mate, Vermin Supreme, verminsupreme2020.com. If you want to see more of me on social media, I'm sure you do, on Twitter. What's that?
Clothed.
It's up to you. You decide how you want to see me. On Twitter at Real Spike Cohan, or on Facebook. If you're putting it in the address bar, it's facebook.com/literally Spike Cohan. Or if you're looking for me on the Facebook, like you're searching on Facebook, it's Spike Cohan, your next VP. And I would love to hear from you. Any questions you have, if you'd like to support me, if you're a delegate, want to vote for me, love to hear that from you. But any questions you have, any concerns you have, anything you'd like to hear back on, I would love to hear from you. My favorite thing is talking to people about libertarianism. And thank you so much for your time. And Anthony, thank you so much for having me on. It was an absolute blast, and you're a great guy, and I love what you're doing over there, 3 hours behind me.
Well, I appreciate the time, Spike, and the thought that crossed through my head here is we might have to get you guys out to Washington for maybe like a college campus tour.
I love that. Yes.
Like we've got a whole bunch of colleges. I'm thinking like 5 days. We just hammer out like 2 colleges a day for 5 days in a row, morning and night. And my campaign manager is a recent college graduate. My wife's worked college campuses. You guys got that experience. I think we could put on a show.
Yes, we call it pound the pavement. We have been going to anywhere. You take me anywhere. College campuses, housing projects, very middle class community. It does not matter. What we do is we go there. We help the candidates who are involved. We help grow affiliates, local and campus and regional affiliates. We help them because a lot of times we're dealing with baby libertarians that are growing those affiliates. We help really educate them and get them moored in the precepts and principles of libertarianism, and we grow the message. I would absolutely love to come out to Washington. I'll spend a week out there. I would love it. I would absolutely love it. That would be great, man. Well,
that is the 4th edition of Be Free TV, and as you can tell, we talked about freedom of all things there. That's what the Libertarian Party is about. That's what our principles are. That's what our core is, and that's what I want these conversations to be about. So, hope you guys all had fun tonight, learned something. Do us a favor. Watch it again later when you have time. Start a watch party. Put it on your LinkedIn. Share it to your Snapchats and your Twits and Twitters and your. Well, if there's some other T's there, I don't know. But do us a favor. Get the word out. Invite friends to follow Spike's pages and his stuff. Invite your friends to follow my page. Right? We need average, everyday people impacting the lives of the community around them, because that's what's going to move things in a healthy, positive direction. So, Spike, appreciate your time. If anybody wants to get in touch with Spike or I'm sure you know how. My website, anthonywelty.com. Buy a t-shirt, buy a bumper sticker, buy a rat card, get some gear, shop online since you can't shop at Costco and Amazon's, they're only sending out medical supplies now. So you can get your cool little bracelets, your Be Free bracelets on my website, anthonywelty.com. But hope you guys all have a great Monday. We'll go ahead and log off here. Appreciate your time, everybody. Be well and be free.
Be free. Thank you, guys.